Ha 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 ha. Tim and Wrath. You guys are partly right. Partly right. Finishing up dinner, but then my air filtration system in the room was acting funny. I had to clean out the filter a little bit. So, but I see Wrath and Tim. I see all your jokes. Y'all got jokes. Wasn't having a problem with the cigar. It's all right. It's all right. I see how we going. This is how we starting out tonight. Wrath and Tim. This is how we start. I can't blame you. I can't blame you. I was late. You know, a whole 10 minutes late. Woo. I told Angelina, I said, I'm gonna hear it from them jokers. It's all right. I'm glad you guys are here. Welcome to Deconstructing Christianity. Lavelle, how you doing? Crypto Paradise, Daryl, Randall, Trifold, how's everybody doing tonight? This should be a good conversation. Actually, I'm gonna have to do it's literally a redo of a video that I did 8 years ago. Why my lighting ain't the way I want it? Something going on here. My lighting right. You know, I need that dark-skinned black man lighting. Yeah, lighting is off. It's still off. Everybody's having a good evening as we get started. Tonight's show, give people a few minutes to get on. Hey, what's up, Daryl, Wayne? Daryl and Wayne and Paul and Lucian. So we here. I know y'all not gonna let me live down my tardiness. It's okay. Don't let me live it down either. Don't let me keep me on my P's and Q's. Keep me on my P's and Q's. Make sure I get here on time like I'm supposed to. That's the plan, crypto. Hopefully we go through some good stuff tonight. Teresa, how you doing? Got an amazing show tonight, I think. It's going to get into a little of that Anunnaki stuff. And how this religion emerged into what it is today. Why my hat feel crooked? You feel crooked. Look crooked. I don't know. We're just gonna go with it. Oh, so if you didn't see, I posted 2 other videos earlier today. One of them had the Tim reminded me of that. Teresa, that is 7 hours away from San Antonio. That's a long ride. Y'all ready? So I'll answer a few questions before we get started. Is Enlil associated with Saturn? Not really. The Babylonian god that's associated with Saturn is Marduk. Praise Enlil to hell with Inky. Praise Inky to hell with Enlil. I understand the thought process. Yeah, well, this is going to be not just Sumerian, but Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, not too much Assyrian, because Assyrian and Akkadian is relatively the same, and Babylonian. East Point, Georgia. Well, when we were in Atlanta in May, we had to meet up at El Jefe out there in College Park, downtown College Park. All right. So tonight's topic that we're talking about is Enlil, Satan, Yahweh, Jehovah, and Allah. That is the question that we shall answer tonight. I did this video. I had this conversation, did this video about 4 years ago in actuality. And I happened to be looking at that video because oddly enough, it's the most viewed video that I have in my YouTube collection. And so as I was listening to that video, I realized that there was one mistake that I made in that. I ain't gonna say it was a mistake. It was based on the knowledge that I had at that time frame, which I will correct tonight. But if you haven't seen that video 4 years ago, then never mind. But you will hear the fullness of it. But I do realize that because of what I said in that video 4 years ago, for a few years thereafter, for some years thereafter, I have made the same statement. So we're going to correct that statement tonight. And then we're going to break down exactly how Enlil matured into these other deities that people are worshiping today, which in essence means that they are still worshiping Enlil as we speak. People say that Saturn is actually Satan, which is why Yahweh, Jehovah, is associated with Saturn. This is also why he says keep the Sabbath day, because Saturday is the day of Saturn. That is true as far as Saturday is the day of Saturn, but that was reference to Baal. Baal and Baal and Marduk, same deity. They represent the same thing. There are some correlation to Enlil and Marduk, but they are distinctively different. The thing about the Sabbath being on a Saturday is that was something that they did pick up from the Babylonians who were worshiping on the Saturday, but they converted that to their belief in El or Yahweh, which they still was worshiping Enlil at that time frame. So they just used the day because the 7-day calendar, they learned that from the Babylonians, and the Saturday was the last day of the week. Saturday was the last day of the week, so it was the day of rest. So it's more of they just utilized that thought process more so than the same worship. And we'll see how they, when we get into the Babylonian time frame, you'll see how they were still worshiping Enlil and why they would have still worshiped Enlil in that reference. But the Satan actually has nothing to do with Saturn. Nothing at all, to be honest. There's a stretch you can make though for the Satan being Saturn, and when I get there, I'll bring that up. Hopefully, I should remember, but I'll bring it up at that point. Thank you for sharing out the session. Now, Enlil. I just thought about something. I wonder if I still have it available. Excuse the noise. Do I still have? Yeah, I do. This will help me with some of the names. You didn't miss anything, Rochelle. I'm just now really getting started. Simba. Cliff, what's up? Athens, Georgia. All right, so I might need this to refer to from time to time. So let me put that right there so I can see it. All right. Yeah, actually, that's very helpful because it'll help me keep my tracks. So, Enlil. Who is this Enlil guy? So, in order to understand the concept of what we're talking about tonight, we have to first establish the story of Enlil and how Enlil came to be and his worship and where he's from and how that traveled its way down to the Hebrew story. So to understand who Enlil is and how they are still worshiping Enlil, has just been a changing of the god to fit the people. So it's not going to be where they directly are following this god, but I have to establish two things. The first thing that I have to establish is where the Israelites come from. So the people who would deem themselves Israelites in and around 1200 to 1300 BCE are the people. These people were Canaanite people, hillside Canaanite people who were worshiping the Canaanite pantheon. The Canaanite pantheon at that time frame and moving forward was the worship of El as the primary god, his wife Asherah, their children Yahweh and Baal. As they move through time and are conquered by other Semitic people, being the Assyrians and the Babylonians, these Canaanite deities evolved into Yahweh taking over the place of El and becoming El, being married to his mother Asherah, who is now his wife, and them having Baal and Mot. And then after the Babylonian captivity, this god was made into more of a universal god. And we're going to see where that thought process comes from. And then this god is made into El, Yahweh, the same, just one God, no husband, no wife, no children, just this eternal God that they didn't originate this idea on their own. And to check a lot of this information, I would encourage you to, what I use is Scholar Google. Scholar Google will allow you to see the different PhD. I always tell you guys I read PhD papers. This will lead you to those PhD papers or books written by PhDs or scholars. I also use academia.edu. You can either use it as a website or you can use it as an app. So I use those two as a lot of my primary places to gain this information. Just straight Google is going to give you a whole bunch of apologetics and other people's viewpoints who are lay scholars like myself. But actually, I ain't gonna call myself a lay scholar because I'm better than most of them people. Shit. But I'm not a school trained. I wouldn't call myself a school trained scholar, right? I haven't written a book yet, but I'm preparing. Enlil and Enki are brothers. If Enlil is Satan, Enki must be God. So basically, Satan and God are brothers. No, it doesn't necessarily convert over that easily. It would be great if it did, but it doesn't convert over that easily. Now, we will be able to see some equivalencies of these guys into other cultures, as they would have similar deities with similar stories. So now, where do you find Google Scholar? So Google Scholar on Google, and it'll change, and you'll see it's now Google Scholar, or it's actually Scholar Google. So you have to Google Scholar Google, and it'll come up. All right, Trifo got his coffee. I got my coffee, got my cigar. So now that we understand that the Israelite people are actually just Canaanite people who, after being conquered over centuries, developed their religious practices away from the polytheistic pantheon of the Canaanite deities into the current form that they have today after post the Babylonian captivity. Now, in order to understand, so we know that in order to understand that, we have to go back even further and go back further and look at the fact of, well, where did the Canaanites get their gods from? These were a Semitic group of people, and how did they develop their religion? Well, their religion is going to disseminate basically from the Sumerian to the Akkadian, because the Sumerians were not only conquered by the Akkadians, but were absorbed into the Akkadians and the Elamites. And so the Sumerians became the part of these Semitic people. Now, in the time frame of Arcadia, in around 2200, 2250 BCE, they were kind of like how the Romans were, to give you something to relate to, where they things were done in Latin, but they read in Greek. So the Akkadians' literature was done in Sumerian, but they spoke the Semitic Akkadian language. So many of the gods' names will change based on the fact of them being converted into Sumerian, from Sumerian to Akkadian. And then on down to Assyrian, which maintain the same names. It is the Babylonians that began to really change a lot of the names and change some of the stories around. So when you go with some of the oldest myths, and these myths being told over a 3,000 year period or more, you're going to get some changes in them. So one version of the story is not the only version, right? And no, yeah, Alfie. Allah is a name, but it's also a title and a designation for the one true God. So in the Sumerian text, in order to get to Enlil, we have to first start with how he came about. So in the story, Enlil, in one of the primary myths, you have, in one version of the story, the name is Namu, which is the Sumerian name. But in the Akkadian, on down, it becomes the name Tiamat. Tiamat is this feminine energy of creation. And Tiamat, or Namu, gets with, Asu. And you have Anu, gets with Anu. And this is the waters below and the waters above, or the salt water and the fresh water. Now, when the salt water, so the salt water and fresh water, they got this representation because when they were in places like the Persian Gulf down in Mesopotamia, where the water deltas are that feeds into what we call the Persian Gulf, or you go down or near Bahrain, and Bahrain, that means two seas, like SEAS. They would see this mixture of salt water and fresh water and the distinction between the two. And so cosmology developed based on observing this natural thing that happens all the time. In recognizing that, they developed Namu, or Tiamat, Anu, and Apsu. Now, the Apsu and Tiamat, they come, and I like their version to use those names, because when you get into the Sumerian, it's like Namu is the mother of Tiamat and Apsu. So Namu is above them. In the Akkadian Babylonian story, which is where the Israelites pulled more of it from, is Tiamat and Apsu, and Namu is not, and Anu is not really part of it. But Tiamat and Apsu have children, and they start creating all the gods of Enki, Enlil, all these other people, all these other deities. Well, the other gods become loud and noisy, and Apsu gets angry about it, and he wants to go and kill them. Well, Enki finds out that he wants to kill them. Enki finds out that he's angry, he wants to kill him, so he captures Apsu, hides him in some little place, and Tiamat finds out, and she brings out all these other monster gods, and I think it's like 12 of them, 11 of them, 8 of them, and they attack. But they wind up killing Apsu, and they wind up killing Tiamat. Well, it is in the original story, it is Enlil who kills Tiamat. And in that original story, Enlil kills Tiamat. The universe is chaotic. And Enlil then sees that Namu and Anu are together. The salt water and the fresh water, the water, I mean, the waters of the above and the waters below are together, right? Kingu is, thank you for bringing up Kingu. Kingu also finds out that the other god children are going to attack, and you make me go a little bit faster than I want to with that one, with Kingu. Finds out that they want to attack, and Kingu tells Tiamat. Tiamat gives Kingu the tablet of destiny. And that actually is important to bring up at this point. Gives him Kingu the tablet of destiny. Kingu has the tablet of destiny, which is supposed to give you authority over the earth. And once they defeat Tiamat, Enlil also kills Kingu and takes from Kingu the tablet of destinies. And I'm blending the two stories, right? I'm blending the two stories. And when Enlil kills Tiamat, and now he's also separating the Namu and Anu, he creates earth. So like in the Bible, it says in the beginning, God looked over the waters of the deep, and there was nothing but darkness, and everything was in chaos. And he said, let there be light, and there was light, and he starts creating the earth. Well, out of the remains of Tiamat, Enlil starts creating the earth. Now, I know some of you may jump to the Babylonians, because during the Babylonian time frame in the first millennium, they changed this from Enlil to Marduk, but it is actually Enlil's story. So Enlil is creating the earth. He's the one over the waters of the absolute. He's the one who separates. This is why he's the god of the storm, or god of the wind. Like En means wind or storm. Lil, I mean, it means Lord. Sorry. En means Lord, and Lil is over the winds. But later on, Lil becomes the universal God who embodies the universe. He becomes this embodiment of the universe, is what the word Lil starts to mean. So the idea of a God that embodies the universe was already present in the ending of his name, Lil. But Enlil creates the earth just as it is structured in Genesis. And when he creates the earth, he creates, he uses the body of Tiamat to create the Milky Way with its tail, and he uses other parts of it to create the land. And so all the parts of Tiamat are being used to make the earth what it is. Then he has these, and because he has the tablets of destiny that he took from Kingu when he killed Kingu, he is now administrator or lord or king or ruler over the earth. Now in the Sumerian, and this is the part I have to correct, the word in Sumeria that means housekeeper or the person who runs the government or administrator is actually Abukarku, something like that. It's Abukarku, and I'm saying it wrong, but it's Abukarkum, something like that. And the word that means ruler is Lulugal. So he is not a word. There is no Satan in the Sumerian language. That's something that I was misinformed on 4 years ago, that I'm correcting right now. There is no word Satan in the Sumerian language. But when you jump over to and that's why I made a point to say that their literature was Sumerian, but their everyday speaking and dealing with each other was Akkadian. In their everyday speaking with each other, they would have understood it. They would have known that they had the same word, Arukarkum, as the administrator, and Lulugal as the ruler over a place. But in this story, Enlil becomes the ruler of earth, and he takes over the earth, and he's the one who's in charge with making sure everything happens, and he grows everything, plants everything. And it is his relationship. It is his relationship with, let me look at my little genealogy over here. Where is Enlil? I know, so Tiamat has Mamu, Lahamu, which is a, damn it, I lost it. I had it in my head this whole goddamn long time. But Enlil gets with some other deity. I forgot which deity he gets with. And by getting with that deity, he is then able to produce all the plants on the planet. It's not Enlil that he gets with and does that, but he gets with one of them and he starts to create all the plants. But the basic idea here is that Enlil is the one who creates the earth, makes all the plants, makes the gardens, make all these different things. And so Enlil is then seen as Yahweh and Allah, because he is the one who takes out of chaos and is fluttering over the waters and creates the earth and is the ruler over the earth and protector over the earth initially. Now, so from that first part of Genesis, out of this story, there is the idea of Enlil being the one who created. Now, this also makes sense as to why in this story it is called the Elohims. It is the council, it is the people, it is a council of gods. There's more than one God. So Elohim is gods and goddesses, a whole council of them. Trifold is saying it was Ninharsag. Okay. I think you're right about that one. Who he created the plants with. So when the Bible says the Elohim, it is speaking of Enlil being the Lord over all gods. Because once he has earth and he is seen as the God of the gods, and Tiamat, Namu, they're all gone. Apsu is dead. Enlil is the God of all gods. It was written in one of the Sumerian poems that Enlil was so magnificent that the other gods could not lift their heads to see him. That sounds familiar, right? That he is so brilliant, so bright, so magnificent, he can't be seen. We see this same thing with Moses and other patriarchs within this story. So once again, we're showing how he is the same God. But before I get into some of those details, let's continue. Let's get a straight line in just language. So Enlil is obviously this God. Now the name Enlil continues on until when you get deeper into the Akkadian or Assyrian time frame, closer to the 1800s and 1500s, his name begins to change to El. So he goes from Enlil to El, and definitely by the time frame of the first Babylonian Empire, he is called El. El is then becomes the patron god of the Canaanite people. So Enlil, who became El, is now the Canaanite god El. Ninharsag or Enlil are then become Asherah. It is not, I couldn't really necessarily find which one of the female deities, whether it was Enlil or Ninharsag, that became Asherah, but one of them becomes Asherah, his wife, in the Canaanite pantheon. So since El is now over the Canaanites as well as the Babylonians and the Assyrians, El, when the Hebrews, the Israelites, separate themselves from the other Canaanite tribes, they still believe in El. So and then when Abraham decides to leave Ur in the worship of El, because the other people in the city of Ur have been worshiping other gods, he is still the primary God. Now, somebody said Ishtar. Paradise said Ishtar. Let me see. I know he marries Enlil. Ninlil. Enki marries no, he marries Ningapuga. I don't think it's Ishtar that he marries. It might, oh, Ninsar. is Ninsar is the one who becomes Ninsar is the one who he marries, who creates the grass and stuff. But Ninharsag does become his wife in order to produce Adam. Oh shit! Somebody just said that. Produce Adamu. But so now we know that. So we see that Enlil becomes El. El is the Canaanite deity, and then continues to move forward in that idea of it being a supreme deity, being the supreme God over all the other gods. Now, while El is becoming this for the Hebrew people, the stories of El begin to go into what will become this Hebrew Bible, right? And even though, and when we see where it's El Elyon, El Shaddai, and even the name Jehovah, which is a Latinized version of Yahweh, but El is the father of Yahweh. And then as we get more into the 600, 700s BCE, the northern kingdom southern kingdom of Judah is worshiping Yahweh, and the Babylonians and everybody else is worshiping El. But then Yahweh gets smashed in with El from the Judaites, which we know is the kingdom of Judah and the tribes of Judah and tribes of Simeon, and they going through all this captivity merged the two, and Yahweh goes and becomes El and is married to Asherah, and they have the son Baal and Mot. But then after that is done, they get rid of Asherah, get rid of Baal and Mot after the Babylonian captivity. And so he becomes this universal God, because they knew the older story of Enlil in the Sumerian pantheon, that in the older story for the Sumerians and the Akkadians, Enlil was a universal God. He was a God of essence, a God of the ether, as well as a being that was personified as a person, as in statues. He also was the one who held the tablets of destiny, which sound very similar to the Ten Commandments tablets, or the tablets, and the tablets supposed to be as part of the Ark of the Covenant, and so on and so forth. Now, there was also some other similarities. In the Sumerian, in the city of Nippur, which is where Enlil was most reverenced, he was no castles were ever built for whoever was the leader of the city of Nippur, because Nippur was a city that was devoted to Enlil, the god of all lands and all people, as he was described by the Sumerians. He also had a house that was built on top of the hill that is very similar to how the the temple is built for Yahweh. He also had his group of priests, similar to the Levitical priests, and they would take the offerings, eat the offerings after they believed that this god consumed the offerings, and then the priests would divide that up. But no castles were built in Nippur. But Babylonian kings, Assyrian kings, rulers from all over, the Canaanite people, and the Semitic people, I should say, all these people were, when you became a king, you took a journey to Nippur, worship at this temple of Enlil, so that you gain your authorization to be the king or ruler of your land. And even when the Babylonians changed the person who killed Tiamat to Marduk and made Marduk the top god, the kings under Marduk still went to Nippur to reverence and worship Enlil. So they still had the mentality, even in the fifth and sixth century, when they were conquered by the Babylonians, they still saw the Babylonian kings go to Nippur in order for them to receive the blessings of El. Because by this time frame in Nippur, there's the worship of El. Enlil was now called El. And so, not wanting to worship the people, Marduk, who destroyed them, who captured them, who enslaved them, they preferred to worship El, and they skipped over Marduk. So we don't have Marduk. They don't worship Marduk. This is what I was saying earlier. Uh, Marduk, which was worship on Saturday, which is his connection to Saturn. They didn't worship him in that way. They didn't worship Marduk, and Saturday wasn't the Sabbath because of that. But they instead said, instead of worshiping the same God of our enslaver, we're going to worship the God that they worship. That we're going to worship the God that's above their God. And so that's how El becomes their God. And in that, they adopt El. And they already knew of older times when their people, Canaanite people, worship El when he was part of the pantheon. Now, I said that there's a stretch that you can make. And the stretch is the fact that the story of Enlil gets changed to the story of Marduk, and Marduk is represented by Saturn. You can make that stretch, but it's not a good stretch to make. Simply because we know that they just switched the stories out. We know that Marduk is the son of Enlil's brother Enki. So it's not a point, it's not a good point to argue, right? Now, I know we're focusing on the Israelite portion of it, but always keep in mind that Abraham was worshiping El. If Abraham existed, Abraham would have existed in around 2200, 2500 BCE. Abraham comes from the city of Ur. Abraham would have been a Sumerian. Being a Sumerian, he was worshiping Enlil or El at that time frame. In worshiping El, once he had his child with Hagar, and that child becomes Ishmael, and Ishmael and Hagar are kicked out into the wilderness, and then this God springs up a well, and from that well, Hagar and Ishmael are able to build a life for themselves and trade with travelers, and out of Ishmael come the 12 kings, and these 12 kings are the progenitors that developed the Arab nation, and what's his name? Muhammad claimed that he was a direct descendant from one of those kings, which makes him a direct descendant to Hagar's son Ishmael, which makes him a direct descendant to Abraham. And if the God of Abraham is El Enlil, then Allah gets transformed into, Enlil gets transformed into Allah. So it still is the same God. Still the same God doing the same damn thing. I know what I'm saying. Let me see some of your question statements. I always thought that the Ugaritic ball cycle predates the merger between Yahweh and El. Definitely an interesting perspective to think about. The Ugaritic ball cycle does predate the merger between Yahweh and El. It does predate it. I'm just checking some of your questions. I know I've been talking for a minute. I don't want to just skip everybody. Let me scroll a little bit. I see some of y'all talking to each other. All right. Actually, the Bible actually says that Hagar was Egyptian. Now, I don't know if you want to, and there was no such thing as the Arab at that time frame, really. She was just an Egyptian slave that was given to Abraham and Sarah after he pimped her out to the Pharaoh, and then the Pharaoh found out that she was his sister, his wife, actually, not just his half sister, and pimped her on out and gave him all this stuff. I mean, this would have been happening around 2200 BCE. So there really wasn't a tribe called Arabs at that time. I mean, could she have been like a Midianite or Moabite or something like that? It's possible. How many sons did Enki have? We know that Enki had Marduk. Shit, let me check. He had Marduk. No, that's a daughter. Nagal is a daughter. Ninkuro is a daughter. He had I think he mostly had daughters. I think Marduk is his only daughter. Just taking a quick look at my I got this genealogy. It looks like he mostly just had everything on this genealogy just shows daughters. Yeah. Right. The Arabs were the offspring that they become Arab over time, over a long period of time. But they go into a bunch of other gods that they worship before they get to Allah. Allah doesn't come up until it's not invented until the 600s CE. Now, if you look at some of the stories, then Noah would have been a human hybrid son of Enki. His name would have been Utnapimtum or um, Atrahasis, depending upon which version of the story you're reading. Now, so in seeing that all the creation was done by the earth creation was done by Enlil, he was running everything. The part about the Satan is a little bit is off. The Satan would still be Enlil. It's just that in the Job story, El is like he's both. You either have to say he's both El and Satan, or in the Job story you would have to say he's Satan, that he's only the Satan, and Anu is El, is Yahweh in the Job story. And the reason why you may draw, I lean more towards him being a Satan and not being considered El during that time frame. And like I said, these stories change, is because in that Job story, the Satan is not an evil character, but the Satan is the one that's running Earth. It's like the Satan is an agent of Yahweh to run Earth, or an agent of El to run Earth. And so, and he wasn't a good guy still. I mean, but none of these were good people. They all had their ups and downs, their positives and negatives, but he would have been the one running Earth. I don't think he would have been both. So that's why in the Job story, and just the Job story, no other story, just the Job story, that is the only place where I would say that Enlil is not El, but he is the Satan because he's the ruler of Earth. Because in the earlier versions, in the Sumerian poetry, it was Enlil who separated the heavens and the waters above, waters below, and took Earth and made it his creation and became the administrator over the earth. And so, seeing as how the Job story is supposedly is the first and the oldest story that was written, then the Job story would make Enlil, out of that Sumerian pantheon, the Satan, and it would make Anu El. Now, of course, like I said, these stories change. So by the time you get into late, around the early first and second century of CE, of the Jewish religion, the Hebrew religion, and you get into about the 3rd and 4th century. No, not the 3rd and 4th. Yeah, about the 3rd and 4th century into the 5th century of Christianity, there becomes this change in the ideas of who the Satan is, and the Satan then becomes this evil person who is merged with the serpent in the garden, who is also merged with the beast or the devil. And so that part didn't change in Judaism until 1st, 2nd century CE Judaism, 3rd, 4th, 5th century Christianity. But prior to that, they were just separate deities. Now, yes, all of these were Anunnaki. These are the Anunnaki gods that get converted over into the Canaanite gods, which is where these Israelite people come from. Now, some people like to think that the Satan might have been Enki, but that is when you are taking how the Christians and the Christianity and Judaism had merged the Satan and the serpent together and Lucifer together to make one being, but it's not. Enki would, the only character that Enki, well, it's not the only character, but the primary character that Enki matches up to would be the serpent in the garden. Because remember, in the Sumerian story, it is Enki and Harsag, Anu, and Enlil who go into the Apsu, utilize the Apsu. They make man in order to make man, they had to kill an Anunnaki and use his blood in order to change the DNA of the human-like the Homo erectus, or whatever version of Homo sapien was around, but most likely Homo erectus. Change that version, speed up his genealogy so that he becomes Homo sapien. And then it is in that garden, and there are two varying stories. There is one story where Enki tricks Adamu into not accepting immortality from Anu. In another story, he tricks him into not accepting immortality from Enlil. In another story, he teaches the woman, Titi, how to use tools. And tools were the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the reason why tools were the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and Enlil didn't want man understanding how to create tools, because a hammer can build a house, or a hammer can tear down a house. A screwdriver can tighten things together, or a screwdriver can separate things. So tools were the thing that made people equivalent to the gods, because now you can build your own society. You don't need gods to build your own society. There is so in those stories, Enki would match up with the serpent story, but also in those stories, Enlil again matches up with the El story. In the El story of the garden of where you have Cain and Abel, even though in these Akkadian, the names is Cain and Abel. Akkadian is Cain and Abel. No, Sumerian is Cain and Abel, but in the Akkadian story, there's two other names that I can't pronounce right now. I can't remember, rather. And they are clans. Cain and Abel are clans. Now, there are persons who are representative of them, but they are clans. And these clans, one is in charge of, is a shepherd, and the other one is a farmer. And Enlil actually is the one who designed the plow. It's called a mattock, and it plows and does a few other things. But the mattock that Enlil designed is given to man so that man can irrigate and he can plow fields and grow crops. In the Sumerian story, the Sumerian poem, it's a little different, because the clans are arguing, the shepherds and the farmers, and these are two gods. So they're two gods, but they also represent two types of people. They then clash, but since Enlil sides with the farmers, then everybody rejoices and everybody's happy because it's all been settled. And but that story gets changed over to Cain and Abel. And but this Enlil in that version of the story chooses the meat over the veggies. Now we had a vegetarian meal tonight. I chose the veggies. Let's see, does my thing go down that far in his genealogy so that I can know what those names are and be able to tell you those names? I don't see those two names. I was in the gym when I was going through this in my head, and so I couldn't write it down. Now I'm gonna have to disagree with you here. Enlil is not Lucifer. Lucifer is the star Venus. I mean the planet Venus. Lucifer is not in all the writings about Lucifer, which is only mentioned twice in the Bible. Lucifer is Venus, the morning star, but which is actually a planet. So that would be more the way you would connect that to the Sumerians. That would be Ishtar. Not according to the female angels don't exist according to the Christian text or the Hebrew text. Female gods, and these angels would not be. The angels would be either your Igigis. Igigis would fit the angel narrative because they were the younger, lesser Anunnaki. You had the primary Anunnakis, and they were male and female. And then you had the Igigi, which were lesser of the Anunnaki, and they were male and female as well. But there is the thought process that many scholars have that whether you're looking at it from Namu and Anu creation or the Tiamat Apsu creation, that Namu or / Tiamat were first, and out of them the male deity of their male counterpart Anu and Apsu were the instructional part that went out and manifested, but came out of the feminine. But once Enlil killed Tiamat or Namu, then that's when patriarchy took over, and the woman energy was smashed down. But prior to that, most religions, the primary gods are born out of the feminine energy. You have other ones like in the Greeks with chaos forms everything and all that, but you in most situations it is the feminine energy that manifests their counterpart male, but at some point some male kills the feminine. Even in the Gnostic version, it is the Yaldabaoth who ignores the feminine Sophia and creates this our known universe on his own. Now, there is the story where the Gigi comes down from Mars, and they take a bunch of women from Marduk's wedding because Enlil and Enki weren't giving them no women and no wine. Y'all got to throw the wine in there. They weren't getting no women and wine. And then they represents that fallen angel that you have in Genesis, was that Genesis 4 or Genesis 6, somewhere around in there? Even in my Shakti Hindu faith, all gods and men are started to come from the golden one. Right. How about tools of science? I mean, all tools would have been considered scientific tools back then, even if you, whatever tool you created. And according to the Sumerian poem, they didn't want man wasn't allowed to be able, man wasn't allowed two things. One, to have access to the tool, the tool making, the knowledge of tool making, nor were they allowed or supposedly allowed to be able to reproduce. If men were just clones, and they would always believe that their God has to create each individual person that exists. So there's no family structure, there's nothing like that. So they are made to serve the gods. And the Sumerians believed that man was made to serve the gods. And if they didn't have the ability to make tools, then they can never usurp the authority of the gods, because, I mean, it would be like you got a stone and they got a tank. But they also wouldn't need the gods. This is why in that story, you have the person who made the matak, or for lack of a better term, we're just going to say a plow. That would be Enlil made the plow and gave it to man so that he can farm and irrigate. The only credibility that you may get to that is the fact that, well, you could have originally in previous years given credibility to the fact that the Sumerian culture just kind of popped up out of nowhere and knew how to farm and irrigate and all this sort of thing. But, and I'm doing a little bit more research, but because of the new findings at Göbekli Tepe, we're finding out that the Göbekli Tepe also had quarters in it. People came and lived there, that it was a worship center as people went out and hunted in groups of hunters. So there was a society there thousands of years prior to the Sumerians. So they could have that create, and that they also had agriculture at Göbekli Tepe. So Sumeria wasn't the first people to develop agriculture. So the Sumerian didn't just pop up out of nowhere. I know. Yeah. Let's see. Now, I'll say I don't know about Ishtar giving the Tablet of Destiny. I know Tiamat gave it to Kingu, and then Enlil took it from Kingu. And it's possible later on in other stories that I haven't read or can't remember that Ishtar did take these tablets of destiny and give it to man. And just think about how those stories are repetitive. You got Prometheus giving man fire. You know, you have all these stories in every culture where some renegade god gave man some technology to move man into a higher destiny, to move man forward in civilization. And whether we're looking at the tablets of destiny or fire, you got the plow of Enlil or the matok, or you got Enki providing knowledge as well. In the Akkadian story, yes, Enlil floods the earth because man is overpopulated and is too loud. The Sumerian story, we don't know why it was flooded, because that part of the writing is broken off. And then actually, in that story where he flooded because man was too loud, he was chastised by the younger gods that he could have sent wild beasts, or he could have given men diseases, but he didn't have to flood and kill everything, because it killed everything. And the other gods were pissed because it killed everything. And it's the other gods that made Enlil promise to never do it again. So even in that story, within the story of Noah, you see that the El character is still based off of the Enlil character. And that is the biggest thing, is that, and that's where I'm getting at for the main point. it is not a direct word for word transition in from the Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian into the Hebrew story, but it is taking this part. We already worship El, but let's change the story around. If the Babylonians can change the story from El killing Tiamat to Marduk, then we can change the stories for ourselves to make us to fit our people. And they did change the story, but the stories are based on Enlil, which then you either have to say it's a made-up god or they are worshiping Enlil. Let's see. He said, "Who showed Abel how to sacrifice animals?" Well, see, that's the thing. The story of Abel is based on the clan that was created by Enlil of shepherds. So the idea of him already knowing how to sacrifice animal was something that they borrowed from a story that was told 3,000 years prior. Mm-hmm. This is a good question. So I've been there once, and I viewed the transcripts of the Council of Nicaea. And well, the Council of Nicaea and the battle at the Moldovan Bridge. I don't know what I would want to. That's a good question. What would I view if I was had an opportunity to go there now? Ooh, the Gospel of Marcion. The Gospel of Marcion. That's what I would view. Because right now it's an interesting study that's going on concerning whether or not the Gospel of Marcion is actually the original story, and then Luke was written based on the Gospel of Marcion. Because previously it was believed that Marcion took the Gospel of Luke and chopped it down. But more and more scholars are looking at the point that Marcion's doctrine, the Gospel of Marcion, was added to create Luke. Yeah, do that. Oh, emerald tablets are a little interesting. I'm gonna have to do a video about the emerald tablets. Oh, so Rochelle, earlier I expressed that some of the things that I use is I have an app on my phone called academia.edu. You can also just search it online, academia.edu. But I do it as an app on my phone because then you can create a profile and it can, you can choose what type of things you want to see. And then I also use Scholar Google. Scholar Google will bring up PhD papers and or books that are written by scholars. Those are two good places to start, and you just have to make sure you're asking qualified questions. You can't just ask the question, Bible. You can't just say Bible. You might ask something like, is Satan and Lucifer the same being? Or how did Satan and Lucifer become the same being? If aliens created humans, who created them? Maybe they created themselves or some other aliens. or nature. I've read that as well, but I think that um, that's just an easy way for people to see that, because when you look at the Cain and Abel story, this had to have happened around 440, 4,400 BCE, right? And if it happened around that, but we know that prior to that time, societies were already consuming meat. So, but because Christians believe that's the beginning of man, they will say that that's why. But it could be looked at as just a story talking about how man transitioned from fruits and vegetables to eating meat. Yeah. On Google Scholar, some of the books are not that you can lead to a book, but the papers will, you can find the peer review of pretty much every paper. And because it'll tell you all the other papers that cited it. And so you can go look at the ones that cited it, but you can find peer reviews of most of them. Let's see. Did I miss something? Let's see. All right, so you got it. Good. Let's see. If I've never visited the Vatican myself, but if the information they hold there was free to the public, I bet it would probably. I would agree. I think if they ever opened up the Vatican to the public, or even just to scholastic study, true scholastic study, because they regulate what you can read. And I believe right now is very difficult to get anything that predates 1939. Everything that's older than that, you really got to promise that you're going to make Catholicism look good. So if they opened it up, it would literally destroy religion. It would destroy Christianity. Would be done. You will have a lot of people leave the faith. Some people are going to hold on to it, especially the Protestants. They're going to still hold on to it, but it would really destroy a lot of the faith. Oh, and if you ever go visit the Vatican, make sure you wear some comfortable shoes. From the front till you get to the St. Peter's Basilica is a long ass walk. Wikipedia is good. We got to remember that Wikipedia allows for anyone to write it. So oftentimes I'll go and look at the resources that they claim they got the information from and go into that. But usually Wikipedia is very good at uh, fact checking, I should say. They are very good at fact checking, which so Wikipedia is more trustworthy than a lot of other places. Here's a very good question. Let's say the Anunnaki aliens come back. Do you fight against them or do you serve them? Yeah, unless they just coming down trying to chill with everybody, they in for a fight. If you wear some Jesus sandal at the Vatican, your feet gonna be all screwed up, especially when you hit them cobblestones. You have to clue me in. Who is Louis Jerome Armstrong? What's your take on Gnosticism? I think it is a more authentic form of Christianity. I would agree. I think Gnosticism is probably closer to the original thought processes of Christianity. As a matter of fact, in the video that I did the other day about the real cross of Jesus, uh, I mentioned the fact that Constantine's mother, Helena, was actually a Gnostic Christian. So it's interesting that, I mean, I understand because Constantine chose the Orthodox Christianity because his people who were in the military were Orthodox Christians, and so that's why he chose it. But she was a Gnostic Christian. Uh, she followed the teachings of Lucian, who was the teacher of Arius, and they were um, Gnostic Christians. But I do think Gnosticism is probably it's not about a church, it's not about a building, it's not about a priest, it's about finding this God inside yourself. I missed his question when he said that. So you're right. Serapis is an amalgamation of Osiris and Apis, and then later on they added the more of the Jesus character into these ideas of Serapis, while Vespasian was down in Egypt before he went to Rome to become emperor. And some of the miracles that were supposedly recorded, some of the miracles that were recorded by Tacitus that supposedly happened with Vespasian were miracles that made his way into the Gospels, which is to heal a blind man by spitting in some dirt, and to stand on a man who's infirm in the hands, put your feet on him, and in his hand, a lame man was healed. Those healings made it into the Gospels, so they become a part of the Jesus narrative as well. But prior to that, there was no Jesus when Serapis was created, because this was um, this was the Greeks' way of Hellenizing Egypt by combining their gods, just like they did with Tahuti and Hermes, to make Thoth. And it's just a way of control. It's just a method of control. Simple response: speaking in tongue is emotional. It's emotional bullshit that people have learned to do. It's emotional bullshit. There has never been a speaking in tongue, never has been, never will be. The day of Pentecost never happened. These are just people spitting out gibberish because they're in an emotional state. You're right. So think about it. That's where the wording comes from. Osiris, by this time frame, Asar or Osiris was a god of salvation, because the Kemetic story had changed by this time frame, where Asar was the king over death. He was the place that you went to heaven with, in the field of reeds. It used to be Anubis reigned over there, but it had changed to where Asar was reigning over it. So now Asar is your salvation. This is the place you want to go. So you got to have your spell book so that you can get to the scales of Ma'at, so that you can be measured. Your heart can be measured against the feather of Ma'at. And Anubis had transformed into where he was one of the he was the primary judge over whether or not you got to go if they saw that your heart was heavier than the feather of Ma'at. And Horus or Heru was your advocate, but Asar was your salvation god. None of these guys are real. None of them are real. Tahuti didn't fly across from Atlantis, or Thoth didn't fly across from Atlantis and, come to the land of Kim and teach them civilization. Do you think Constantine saw a holographic cross in the sky, being influenced by ancient technology? No. Constantine made that story up. So when you look at Eusebius of Caesarea, who was his scribe at the time frame, when you look at his writings from the battle at the bridge of Moldavia against Maxentius, there's no mentioning of a cross in the sky. There's no mentioning of crosses on the shield. There's no mentioning of Sol Invictus visiting him in his tent. It is not until he's a few years later in Milan, when he's holding his council and making these other religions legal, Christianity being the primary one because his mother was Christian, that he then, or she became Christian right after that, he then changes the story, and that's when it's recorded that he saw this in the sky and the shields and all that. When you look at his art in Rome, there are no crosses on the arch, there's no crosses on the shield. Mithra, Aphrodite / Venus, and Apollo, they're on his arch showing his victory, but there's no Jesus. There's none of that. There's no crosses. So it's just a made up story so that he can make the Christian bishops feel comfortable. I just said it, man. Jesus is not Serapis. If anything, the only way that Jesus is, some of the Serapis story gets put into the Jesus story. Well, so I can see how people say that Jesus is Serapis because some of those stories get melted into the Gospels. But there's not enough of the Serapis story in there. Just the Lord over the underworld or heaven and some of the miracles. And that's about it. But there's really not much else. Because the Jesus story has a lot of pieces from the Greeks, the Romans, the Kemetic, and the Mesopotamian stories. Y'all keep me on my toes, that's for sure, because jumping from subject matter to subject matter keeps me going a lot of different ways. Now, the imagery of Serapis was used for the first imagery of Jesus, of the Jesus character. But how many of you agree? Let me add my own questions out here. How many of you agree, based on the information that we've talked about today, is it that the Hebrews who were Canaanite, the Israelites who were Canaanite people who worship El, derived their worship of El and many of their stories from the Sumerian god Enlil? I read that too, Crypto, and I can't think of who said it. And for a part of me wants to say that Jerome said that. A part of me wants to say Jerome. But more than likely, either Justin Martyr or Irenaeus said it. But I want to say Jerome, but I'm probably wrong. Put up a poll. Man, I don't know how to do that. Oh, I'm on, because I'm using StreamYard, I can't put polls up like that. If I was, I would have to go to Facebook and do a poll, and then go to YouTube and do a poll. Okay. Enlil is prototype for Yahweh. Yes, I do. Agree. I can see how that would be a straight line from one to the other. Cool, cool, cool. I asked that question because it's different. When I recognized when I did that video 4 years ago, it was just me talking on the video, so I can go straight point for point for point. With y'all on here, I'm jumping around a lot. I didn't go in the direct line and pathway that I wanted to go. What? Wait a minute, before I do that one, this is what I meant to hit. The oldest Bible foundations are rooted in Native American tribes. The people in the Levant, the people in the Mediterranean didn't even know that Native American tribes existed. No. Can you break down and explain how the Caucasians are not descendants of the Nephilim? How could they be? One, the Nephilim never existed. That's the first thing. Two, what we call Europeans were originally people who came from one of the migrations out of East Africa into the Mesopotamia and then into what we call Europe. So no, and it's just through adaptation and changing diet over hundreds of years did that adaptation occur. Yes, and it sucked. It sucked. I didn't like Gladiator 2. It's hard for me not to like a movie. I like the first 2, 3 Fantastic Four movies better than I like that Gladiator movie. They tried to copy the first one and it just wasn't good. Oh, use your whiteboard to list the topics. They still don't stay. Y'all still don't stay on topic even when I do that. Leon said, "There's nothing angelic about me, but not at all." No, it's not. Oh shit! I'm hitting all kind of stuff. Don't understand how they tried tied in it, because people who want to believe that we were already here, they want everything to originate out of America, and so they will try to, and they still want to hold on to some of these biblical stuff. In order for these stories of Enlil to come from the story of Atlantis, we have to be able to find Atlantis first. And you have to definitively know that this is Atlantis and be able to prove it. And then we can go from there. Until we find other than literary references to Atlantis, Atlantis simply doesn't exist. Now, I say that with the pause because for centuries, we didn't think that the city of Troy exists, but until the city of Troy was found. So if we ever find the city of Atlantis, then it would change the story. Now, what we are seeing that Göbekli Tepe is already changing the story. Yeah, I saw somebody comment. Denzel was using his New York accent in the movie. It didn't work. I don't believe I know that they do. I know, like, I know my ancestry. I know where my ancestors came from. My ancestors came from Africa. And just plain and simple, I know my ancestors came from Africa. Africa. They have been tracked. But yes, black people come from Africa. And yeah, Atlantis will be underwater somewhere. So you know how few underwater archaeologists there are in the world? Very few. You said that you don't think that Nephilim didn't exist, but wasn't there large giants that were taller than 7, 8 feet tall in those days? No. The law, what is called the law of three square cube or something like that. The human body, the bone structure, wouldn't be able to handle anything over 8 feet tall. Just wouldn't be able to do it. Even when we have people who, well, anything over 9 feet tall. Anytime somebody is 8 feet tall and all that, before they hit their 20s, they are pretty much incapacitated. They need canes and crutches. The body can't handle it. And all these giant photos have been debunked as forgeries. You know, I was going to watch that and give commentary. I don't think I can allow myself to go through the bullshittery of it all. And then I know it's going to be Hollywood based. Now, the Zoroastrianism does, it was so with when the Hebrew people learned, when they were conquered by the Persians and they learned about Zoroastrianism, this is when they reconnected with the idea of Enlil being, or El at that time frame, being a universal God. This is when that movement started. So from like the early 400s BCE, all the way up until you get to around the first and second century of Judaism, BCE, is when you start getting this universal God. This is when they put off Asherah and all of that. But that was pretty much a go back to Enlil being the universal God, but then taking away the wife and the kids and all of that and changing it to fit more of what Ahura Mazda represented. Not all black people are from Africa. Australians, actually, you can see the migrational path from Africa into India, into Southwest Asia, into Southwest Asia and Southeast Asia, into Australia, into Japan. We see the migration, and we know that some of that was land bridges. And they recently discovered that people in Southeast Asia were building boats before the majority of civilizations around the world were building boats. So those people would have they were seafaring and were able to go to those places. And this is a sad statement. We actually do know more about space than we know about the oceans. And we should know more about the oceans. And that's the biggie, if I'm understanding correct. If we move the water levels to post ice age levels, the land mat, right? So we can go back about 15, 20,000 years ago, before the Younger Dryas flood, when what land was, there was 400 feet more of land, we would be able to discover a hell of a lot more. So the Enlil and Enki exist? No. And the Nephilim really would have been more of, a few of them would have been Anunnaki human hybrids, but the majority of them would have been Igigi human hybrids. Okay, hold on. Actually, who was it? I think they just did something where, I can't remember if it was a Chinese, or it was Japanese, but one of them just showed some footage of the dark side of the moon. I think it was the Chinese. That's a good question. If water levels have uh, risen over 400 feet, and understand the Younger Dryas flood, it really rose in 4 days and 6 days, uh, according to most scientific studies, then it's possible that it could be somewhere within the Mediterranean, which, as some tried to say, it was over near Sardinia, or it could have been off the coast of Africa, or as some say, in the Caribbean. Now, since the stories say that flood happened, that it, when it was flooded, the ones that escaped came into the Mediterranean area and into Egypt, then it would most likely have been off the coast of Africa, off the coast of Portugal, or part of the Mediterranean. Because you got to think, 400 feet, that also would include the Mediterranean itself. And there are some that say the Mediterranean was completely dry, but once that flood happened, it broke a land bridge where the Bering Strait, not the Bering Strait, where the Straits of Gibraltar are, and flooded and created the Mediterranean. Now, that's a whole hell of a lot. But those are my thoughts. It would be off the coast of Africa or Portugal, or somewhere within the Mediterranean. Okay, so Leon is saying that it was the Chinese who put a lander on the dark side of the moon. Um, just it would have been somewhere surrounded by water, of course. That, really, yes. I literally hope it is. I know that this is there. I don't have any proof. I know that it rang like a bell and all those other things, and I understand all the information that it's either is that it's for it's man it's created, And I know that there are ancient stories of when the moon wasn't part of the earth, and there's a Zulu story and a Greek story about when the moon arrived. I would really love if that was true. I can't say it is, but I would love for it to be. Yes, this is what we should be looking at the tops of underwater mountains to figure out where it is, and and I would actually say underwater plateaus. I would say plateaus. Plateaus. Oh, hold on. I need a 2 minute break, and y'all know why I need a 2 minute break. It's a lot of water consumption. 2 minute break. 2 minute break. Everybody take a break. All right, break's over. Where we at? Do I think that humans are aliens to this planet? No, I don't. I don't think that we are alien to this planet. If I did, I would probably follow the thought process of then this planet is a penal colony, and that we all committed some type of crime on another planet, and our consciousness was sent here as a place of repentance. This is correct. Guyana, I've been to hell and back. I've been to Guyana or Gethsemane. Yeah, to Guyana, not Gethsemane, but Guyana. And of course, every tour guy makes the joke that now you can tell everybody that you've been to hell and back. But it's just a garbage heap. So it was used like a metaphor. Hmm. It's an impossibility for one. There's not enough water on the planet or in the planet to be able to flood the planet to the height of Everest. And anything at that height would die. Just like anything that goes that height without oxygen tanks and proper clothing and stuff, you die. You can't build a fire or anything. Now, I don't think that life on this planet is a, what do you say? Is alien to this planet. You believe that it's a fallout from a comet that hit the Earth? I have seen that theory before, that life here began because comet carrying the building materials for life hit the planet and all this the shit got mixed together. But we're still in this habitable zone. Every star has a habitable zone to it. And if you got the right conditions, then what we call life has the possibility of existing. But God. Yeah. But and the church, the thing about it is that they scare you with the church's imaginary friend. The church's imaginary friend sends you to hell if you don't worship him. So through fear. And other people have created other imaginary friends, like Ahura Mazda is an imaginary friend, Enlil, imaginary friend. The closest thing that could possibly be of Enlil is some previous earthen civilization that was intelligent, more intelligent than the more in not intelligent. That's not the word I want to use. More technologically advanced, or somebody was able to fold space and use a black hole or something, or a wormhole and get here and told those people they were gods. There are stars in space. It's just the lighting of the light of the camera devoid of stars. It's just like if you have to, like if you take a picture, if you go into a well lit area like you're in New York, you're not going to be able to take pictures of the stars. It's too much light pollution. And there's something else about why it creates that black background. I forgot the other portion of it. Now, of course, we know that we are all created by the spaghetti monster, the flying spaghetti monster. Get the title right now, the flying spaghetti monster that lives on Saturn. That is our true God. And my wife and I, we gave service to the flying spaghetti monster tonight with the butternut squash raviolis with the red sauce on it. We paid homage to it. Pasta, because we pastatarians over here. Said Noah was a master boat builder in the desert and somehow caught a polar bear by his toenails. That part. Oh yeah. My wife made a great butternut squash ravioli with red sauce tonight with a kale and cucumber salad. It was good. Mm-hmm. And of course, you got to have a cheese wheel, the Parmesan cheese wheel, if you're a true pescatarian. Oh yeah, it's a real religion that was made as a joke. I think most people who follow it know that it's a joke to use as satire towards religious people. But look, as far as space is concerned, there's so many people who think that all the space stuff is false. I mean, even without leaving the planet, we know that there is space and stars and other planets. We're not just existing in this blanket thing. And how did they have they didn't, there was no technology back in the day to create a star filled sky. Several. Growing up, me and my family kicked out of several churches. Then my grandmother finally got tired of it, and she was like, "You ain't got to go to church no more. Just stay home." Yeah, all around Cobb County, Georgia, um, several of the churches there didn't like the fact that from 9 to 12 that I was asking too many questions. I would agree with you here. Out of the Bible, I would agree with Thomas. I'm not just going to accept your apparition. I need some proof. I need you to prove to me that you Jesus. You can just accept it just on face value. Yeah, and the other aspect of it is that I was finding out that many of the pastors back in Cobb County at that time frame, they didn't know how to read. There was at least three that didn't know how to read, and I'm questioning, how can you teach me about a book if you can't read the book? Like, that was a big problem for me. Well, I can say this about studying space. You can study space from telescopes on top of mountains, and there's plenty of instrumentation that you can use to gather information from space. But and space, once you get out of the atmosphere or in the upper atmosphere, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think you have as much pressure as you have in the deeper parts of the ocean. The ocean pressure makes it very difficult to study the oceans, and you can't just look down there. You know, we literally need better technology to study the oceans. Do you think the first movie does a good job describing our world, or is it there another movie you like better? Nope, The Matrix is one of the best ones, in my opinion, that describes our world. Because, and I don't take The Matrix as a literal thing, but to describe that people are walking around here not knowing what's going on, thinking that they're living their own lives, not understanding how they're pushed and prodded around like cattle. Yeah, I think it's great. And only a few people start to recognize that something just ain't right. I think it's a great description of our world. And I'm gonna tell y'all, John right about this one. Until you've been in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or some big ass ocean like that, not the Caribbean. The Caribbean don't really do it for me, but the middle of the Atlantic, and then the ship decided it's gonna run dark, and because you are who you are, you step outside the skin of the ship anyway, and you see, I mean, the sky is beautiful. But when you start to look out at that water, that and it looks black, that black depths of the water and all of that, I don't give a damn who kingdom I'd have been living in back in the day. I wouldn't have been floating across this damn water. The ocean, and it can unnerve you a little bit. When you do that, take one of them transatlantic cruises, and if they turn the lights off, whoo, ah, that middle of the ocean is whoo, that's something special. But yes, they're teaching you what they were told, and how many people would swear the Bible says there were three magi, even though there was we don't know the number. Oh yeah, most of them haven't read shit. They just go by what the pastor said and what my mama and my grandmama said. Oh, you been out there? It is surreal. I was just telling my wife that when we was on that Caribbean cruise, it ain't nothing like when you out there in the middle of that ocean. And this is a good question. Now, everybody has said, how can one be blasphemous towards a book that's either not true or full of contradictions? You can't be. And you can't be blasphemous against a book that is just filled with, you have to believe it. Just believe it. No facts, just believe it. Well, the thing about now, one of the techniques that we use is, what is it, sound waves, I believe, utilizing sound waves for deep earth penetration, which can give you an idea of the composition of the earth. And and that is used to map. I think that's one of the things that they use to map the ocean floor, that sonar. And but there has to be a way, but it's so vast. It's just like when we look up at space, we are charting very little of it. But what lidar, because with lidar they're finding these civilizations in the Amazon jungle and the Central American jungles. They're finding all types of structures and buildings. So I would love to see lidar being used on the ocean, towards the ocean as well. Yes, thank you. Leon's with me. That damn lidar, that's what we need to use as well. But like I said, the thing about it is it's so much space. Isaac stupid. You gonna be Noah. You the modern day Noah. I ain't gonna lie to you though, Isaac. When we was going across the Atlantic, headed towards we were supposed to been going first to Desert Storm, but then we got redirected down to Liberia. Once I started seeing some birds, I felt I felt more comfortable on that first time around. Now, second time, going back across, I was like, okay, I know it's gonna take 10 days, no big deal. But that first time, after about that fourth, fifth day, I'm like, ain't no land around. And I saw a couple of cargo ships, but if this shit go down, you're kind of screwed. No, if you ever remember, I'm gonna have to look that up because I want to see what they find. And they should be going coastline out. It would be an amazing discovery to find these civilizations that were living, to find civilizations that were existing prior to the Younger Dryas flood. But I can imagine the difficulty of it with what 12 to 14,000 years of ocean currents, coral changes in water temperatures. It's not going to be an easy task. And that's a good place to also look for stuff because at one point, the UK and mainland Europe were connected. So there should be some types of civilizations in between the two. That will help. Understanding how whales and dolphins use their senses to navigate and do all their stuff. Um, and then, to find those things like the heavy water lakes that are at the bottom of the ocean and finding life at those little magma vents. You know, there's some shit down there. And like somebody said earlier, one of the scariest things is you don't know. Trauma said it. You don't know what's up under you. Well, one of the ways of being able to, you see, there's less density when you're dealing with space, right? You remember back in the day, they thought that space was empty, that it was a vacuum, but it's not a vacuum. There's matter there, but it's so thin that you can sense the radiation and the heat and the different types of light and all these sorts of things and be able to, so what you send out into space travels further and faster than what you send through the ground or through the water and into the floor. You got to think whatever you send down to the ocean has to penetrate the pressure and the matter of the water and the heavier water as it goes down, and then you hit dirt, you hit the surface, and you got to penetrate that. So that's why I was saying that we need better technology for the ocean. How in the hell did we go from Enlil to the goddamn ocean? Oh, because people start asking about Atlantis. Y'all some distracting people, just to let all y'all know. Y'all can. So it's been 2 hours. So let's recap. Let's recap for a few minutes. I'm not going to go through everything that we talked about earlier because that would take a whole another 30, 45 minutes. But in recapping, we can see that the Sumerian poems and the Sumerian stories concerning Enlil lead directly to the worship and belief in El, and how El becomes the Canaanite god, and from that Canaanite god of El, he becomes the Hebrew Israelite god El, and through that El becomes also Allah through Abraham and Hagar's child Ishmael. But El also incorporated many of the stories from the Sumerian poems and texts, such as Enlil having dominion over earth, Enlil creating the earth out of the chaos of a war between the old gods and the new gods, basically, and how the worship of Enlil, even when they started worshiping Marduk, the royalty still gave El all this credit and still believe that El was this universal God. We see that the story of Cain and Abel comes from the teachings of the Sumerian poems, whether we're talking about the Cain and Abel version of the story or the two other gods who were shepherds and farmers. It still all comes down to Enlil. So at the end of the day, Christians, Jews, Muslims are all worshiping Enlil as their God. Yes, it has varying parts. It varies from the older stories, but the prototype of their God is Enlil, who with the tablets of destiny became the overlord God, who cannot be looked upon because he is too great and too shiny. That is El. And of course, they changed some of the stories to fit, getting rid of Asherah, getting rid of his children, and making him this one universal God of El. He is the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. Now, it's not the Jesus story. The Jesus story is a different direction that was taken when the Romans created Jesus with the help of some Hellenistic Jews. Now, I don't know if you was here for that part. Marduk is actually Enki's son that the Babylonians, after the first millennia, changed Marduk's story to fit. They changed Enlil's story, They changed Enlil's story and made it Marduk's story. So he's not, Marduk is not Enlil. They just gave Enlil's story to Marduk as far as defeating Tiamat and becoming the Lord of the earth. But Enlil is still a separate being. And yes, Enlil is the God of the Christians. Nope. They are not metaphors for the sun. They had a sun god. His name was Utu. Utu was a sun god. Shemesh was a sun god. They had gods for the sun. Enlil means Lord of the winds initially, or Lord of the storms. Is a storm deity, just like Yahweh is the storm deity. They're not metaphors for the sun. And Jesus was created from more than 3 people. He's a combination of at least 4 different Yeshuas who are itinerant preachers in the first century that Josephus wrote about, but also elements of Serapis, which is elements of Apophis and Osiris, but also elements of Heru, miracles performed by Serapis through Vespasian, as well as some of the attributes from the Ahura Mazda. So Jesus is cobbled together by many different stories. And there are a few of the things from Baal that were added to the Yahweh story. And that's how, when you step back and look at it, it's kind of like there's a bunch of stories and they overlap and took a lot of those stories to make El. But the cornerstone is Enlil. And as they keep moving forward, they kept changing this story. Hell no. From my understanding of listening to him, he believes the Anunnaki existed. He thinks that the Bible Jesus existed. He on a whole nother line of bullshit. He's more like a religion. He takes a little bit of something and turns it into a bunch of other stuff. What type of cigar do you like? I like full-bodied cigars. Mostly the leaves that I like are Nicaraguan leaves, Peruvian leaves, Mexican San Andreas, African Cameroon, some Cuban. Those are the leaves. I'm more about a leaf than I am a brand. Now there are some brands that have cigars I like my father's, but I don't like Connecticut's at all. Or the green leaf. I forgot what that green leaf is called. Candela. Don't like Candela leaves. Hate Candela leaves. Candela leaves are the worst fucking leaves ever. But yes, you know what I talk about. You say something about cigars, I'm gonna break on that one. Yes, the Muslims do believe that he is forever and all that kind of stuff, but he derives from Enlil. You in good company with a lot of other people on here, Leon, with that one. I bet you if I invited y'all somewhere to have a weed smoke, y'all come clamoring. Oh, Randall. And if I wanted to run downstairs, I would go grab it and bring it up here. But it is the Nuance Triple Roast. Nuance Triple Roast. Nuance Triple Roast. My wife got a couple of them maturing downstairs. I forgot what the junk DNA stuff was about. I have to go look it up again. Where you at, Ted? Have you tried the Partagas Verde? The Partagas Verde, especially if you let it sit for about 2-3 weeks, that Partagas Verde with a good bourbon or some coffee, that Partagas Verde is great with that. It got kind of that green chili to it, or whatever, chili salsa to it, with that nice tobacco and little cocoa, and excuse me, and just enough like spice to it. I said no smoking, no drinking. You're in danger. So alcohol doesn't affect me. That's the sad part about it. I have to get damn near alcohol poisoning for it to affect me. You talking about the Kentucky Fire cured? Kentucky Fire cured. So if you like the Kentucky Fire cured, you'll probably also like the Toscano, especially the Toscano Duecento. But the Kentucky Fire cured. Well, I guess the nuanced triple roast is not downstairs maturing anymore because somebody made them a cup of coffee when they made mine. And I guess that's what they're smoking right now while they're rolling cigars. So let me take that back. Yes, when I talked about the book of Job, that is the only time that I think Enlil was not being represented as El, but Enlil was being representing Satan in the Job story, because the Satan in the Job story is acting as governor over the earth, which is what Enlil did when he separated the Absu, separated the waters, Absu, the Anu and Namu, and separated them and claimed and created earth. Oh, trust me. We're trying a new coffee today. It is a Mexican Altura coffee, and it has this dark bean roast to it. So I'm pretty sure, I'm not surprised she smoked it. And I know somebody else said it earlier, it might have been Sean, but yeah, sometimes a drunk person can make more sense than a sober person. Yeah, and even in those 10 commandments, which are comparable to the tablets of destiny, there are no other, you shall have no other gods before me. Well, if there are no other gods, why would I have it? And you know, the way they explain it is saying that man created the other gods that they worship, or they're worshiping demons, and so he was just making a point. What's your favorite esoteric book besides the Tao, the Kabbalion, the Corpus Hermeticum? Corpus Hermeticum is long, but the Tao, I mean, the Corpus Hermeticum, the Kabbalion, and I actually do like the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is, you know, some of it is straight bullshit, but the Gospel of Thomas would be like, so my top 5 would be the Kabbalion, Corpus Hermeticum, the Tao, Gospel of Thomas, and Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. But guys, that's the end of the night. It's 2 hours. I'm go down here and help my wife roll some cigars by sitting there talking to her while she rolls the cigars. Yeah. Got to do my part. Got to do my part. So I appreciate everybody tonight. Tomorrow night we'll be back on at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I look forward to all of you guys being here. I look forward to having a great conversation. Please continue to share, subscribe to the channel. For those who are members of the channel, I greatly appreciate you being a member. Those who are subscription holders on Facebook, thank you for being subscription holders on Facebook and members on YouTube. Thank you very much. Those who support the channel that way, thank you for that. I appreciate that always. So y'all have a great night, and always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations, and we are out for today.